The following episode contains material that may be uncomfortable, upsetting, and unsuitable for some audiences. Listener discretion is advised. It was a warm spring night on the 3000 block of Piedmont Drive in 1957 when a well-to-do couple vanished from their desert home in El Paso, Texas. They left behind a fully set dinner table, an unlocked house, and their beloved cat, and a trail of questions that has haunted the desert for nearly 70 years. Who were the Pattersons, really? Respected business owners, recluses with secrets, or something else entirely? Now, over the decades, their disappearance has become a story whispered across generations, a local legend steeped in mystery. Some say they were spies, others believe they were murdered, and a few, well, they claim that they never actually left the house at all. Doors creak at odd hours, lights flicker with no cause, and people who have lived there since swear that they have felt something watching, something waiting. So join me as we step inside a mystery where the living aren't the only ones with something to say. Hello, fellow fiends. Welcome to another episode of Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces, the podcast where the world of true crime meets the paranormal. I'm your host, Cassiopeia. Join me every Tuesday as I deep dive into chilling cases that have baffled investigators and the eerie places where dark stories still linger. Today, we're diving into a case that has more questions than answered, spawned ghost stories, and even stirred Cold War conspiracy theories for nearly 70 years. It's the story of William and Margaret Patterson, a couple from El Paso, Texas, who simply vanished one day in 1957, leaving behind a house full of belongings and a confused community. By the end of this episode, you might be asking yourself, did they actually run away, or did someone make them disappear? 52-year-old William Patterson and his 42-year-old wife, Margaret, they kept to themselves, and few people in El Paso really knew them. Now, what we do know is they both had pretty rough childhoods. They owned a successful photo supply shop in the downtown area at 123 East Main Street. That address today, simply a parking lot. Now, William was an avid fisherman and formal carnival barker. Margaret, a quiet housewife, raised on a Kentucky farm. Now, although Margaret had 6 siblings, she hadn't spoken to anyone in her family in over 2 decades, and they actually thought that she was dead. William didn't really talk to his family either, because neither family approved of their marriage. Now, for the most part, people liked them, but no one knew their birthdays, how they met, or how long they'd known each other, or how long they'd been married. But it seems that the couple preferred it that way. Now, March 5th, 1957, Cecil Ward, a friend of the Pattersons, visits their home. They've been working on William's 18-foot motorboat, and on this specific evening, they were applying acrylic. Cecil said that they were talking about taking future fishing trips, how business was going at the photo shop. Everything seemed normal. And they even made plans to meet later again that week. However, that night was the last time anyone would ever see the couple again. Now, the story gets a little odd right from the beginning. Cecil Ward didn't report the Pattersons missing until August 15th, 1957. Now, that's more than 5 months later. Now, why the delay? Well, friends assumed that they were in Mexico. The Pattersons owned land in Guaymas, a Pacific resort town where they took trips pretty often. But they had never disappeared for months before. A week here, few weeks there. And William did tell Cecil that they had just bought a new house trailer that they were going to take down and park on the property. When their home was checked, everything looked like they had just stepped out for an evening stroll. There were unwashed dishes in the sink, clothes laid out on the bed. The lights were still on. Margaret's purse and William's wallet, well, those were still sitting on the dresser. Now, even their beloved cat, Tommy, had been left behind, malnourished and filthy. Now, the weird thing here is Margaret absolutely adored Tommy. This cat was one of the highlights of her life. She never would have left him like that. She would have even taken him with her if they were going to be gone for a long time, or she would ask a neighbor to watch over him. Now, just after their disappearance, William's Cadillac was seen being driven by Doyle Kirkland, a competitor who worked for a rival photo shop at Duffy's Photo Service. Now, Cecil asked why he had the car, and Doyle shrugged it off as no big deal and said that William had called him 3 a.m. that morning. Now, this was March 6th. This was actually the day after that they had gone missing. And he said that he couldn't really, he was kind of groggy, and it sounded like William was asking for help with the boat and telling him to look after things because he and Margaret were taking a little vacation. Okay. I don't know why you would call somebody at 3 a.m. to tell them you're taking a vacation, but whatever. Now, the Cadillac was found at Ward's garage with the key in the ignition. A mechanic confirmed that, yeah, sure, it had been dropped off that morning, but it wasn't William who was behind the wheel. Then came the telegram. So William's accountant, Herbert Roth, received a telegram from William, allegedly. It said, quote, "Sorry, had to leave so sudden. Put Kirkland in charge. Handle all this as quietly as possible. Important. Sure you will understand. Pat." So here's the thing. First of all, isn't Doyle Kirkland a guy who works for a rival photo shop? The telegram was phoned in. Now, I could understand it being phoned in if you're trying to leave in a hurry, if you're trying to, you're not really wanting to have to go down to the office and do all that. I can understand it being phoned in. There was no handwritten original. Now, I feel like even if you phone this in, the person taking the telegram is going to have to write it down so they can remember, word for word, or they, just to go ahead and fill out that telegram. And it was signed W.H. Patterson. Okay, why is that odd? Well, William's initials are W.D. Patterson. Now, attorney David J. Smith received a typewritten letter on March 29th, postmarked from Laredo, Texas, and it claimed that William and Margaret were leaving the country for good. Now, it's a little odd that it goes from they're taking a little vacation to they're leaving the country for good. It gave detailed instructions for how to divide up their property. Something a little odd is that none of it went to friends or family. Now, sure, they hadn't had real communication with their family for a while, but you would think that something as major as this, you're selling a business, you're selling a home, you're selling this, you're selling that, you're getting rid of all this stuff, you wouldn't give it to at least people who are close to you. Instead, it went to 3 of their employees, Herbert Roth, Doyle Kirkland, and Arthur Moreno, a 24-year-old employee who just works at the shop. And that's really the only time you hear his name brought up in this story, or at least as far as I could find in my research. It was just he was kind of basically, give him a little bit of money. Okay, I could see if maybe Arthur Moreno was a really good employee, maybe you were kind of friendly, with ages. Maybe they looked at him as as kind of, like a son or something like that. And you want to give him a little bit of money? Okay, sure. So, in that letter, William, supposedly, also gave the instruction to use the vehicle for the business, sell the house trailer, the one that they were just talking about taking down to Mexico to park on their property there, and use the money towards the business as well. He also added rent the house for 9 months. Okay. Now, their attorney, David J. Smith, claims that the telegram and the letter were authentic, but he had no idea where the couple was. Okay. Suspicious? Yeah, you bet. Because if you're leaving the country for good, sorry, if you're leaving the country for good, why would you rent the house? Why wouldn't you just sell it? Why would you have them sell the house trailer? Once again, you're going to be taking that with you. Also, why would you not tell people, hey, we're leaving the country, we're going to be fine, this, that, the other? Well, the house was rented to Lieutenant Colonel and Mrs. Belson from England. Now, Mrs. Belson told authorities that they had rented the house through a rental firm on July 17th, under the impression from Roth and Kirkland that the Pattersons were on holiday until December. At this time, the boat was in the garage, and the couple requested that it be moved so they could have use of the garage. After that, it said that it was put in the basement, but now not sure where it ended up after that. So after this telegram and the letter that William had supposedly sent, there was no communication from the Pattersons to anyone. And some say that this is kind of odd because William actually liked to send postcards when they were on their trip, just to kind of say, we're having a great time, and he would kind of, boast about his fishing trips. Roth sold the house trailer, still claiming he had no idea where the couple had gone. And there was still no sign of the Pattersons in Mexico. Friends there were becoming concerned. Now, Roth, throughout all of this, kind of became uncooperative. He became very unconcerned, and when the authorities were investigating and questioning him, and it seemed, did he know more than he was telling? Sergeant John Fritzl couldn't get any information from him, and he himself claimed that there was no evidence of foul play. Okay. So shortly after their disappearance, Sheriff Hicks put an APB out across the nation for the couple. Their family in Chicago, they were actually really surprised that Margaret was even still alive. Like I said earlier, they thought she was dead. And they were concerned, but not really alarmed. Now, William's father, on the other hand, 75-year-old Luther Patterson, he said at the deposition that he wasn't really surprised. He claimed that he knew the couple would take off like this someday. He thought they were just simply hiding, saying that William had done things like this before, and pointed out that William worked for the carnival and basically lived his life through sleight of hand tricks. Now, as the investigation went on, Roth became very irritated. He always seemed agitated when he would be questioned. He would call anyone who asked questions a bunch of busybodies and said it was no one's business where the Pattersons had gone. And this just eventually turned into no comment anytime he was asked about anything. Now, part of me kind of understands, like, if you're constantly being questioned and you've told them, this is what I know, this is what I know, this is what I know, I can understand that. But it just seems that his name keeps popping up a lot, and it just seems to me, very suspicious and very like, okay, something's up with this guy, but you can't prove it, so I get it. Now, on August 21st, 1957, someone claimed that she had heard from Margaret and said that Margaret told her she found William under treatment in a sanitarium and that she would be staying close by with him. Okay, cool, you heard from them. However, Margaret found William in a sanitarium and decided to stay while he was going through treatment. Now, I find that a little odd because they disappeared at the same time. It's not like William had disappeared and then Margaret, was like, oh my gosh, where's William? I can't find him. And then all of a sudden found him and reported back on the situation. I just find that to be, it's just a little fishy. Now, in August of 1962, David E. Goodman purchased the Photoshop for $80,000. And it was around this time that Doyle Kirkland left El Paso and police just basically lost track of him. Cecil Ward was once again questioned, and he described William as being rather boisterous and extravagant, but kind. Now, remember, Cecil Ward was the friend of the Pattersons, but around this time of questioning, this is when some secrets began to emerge. He told police about a recent incident that happened in Mexico when William got drunk and picked a fight with a waiter who refused to serve his 20-year-old mistress, Estefana Arroyo Morfin, while they were out on a date. He then told Estefana, William supposedly told Estefana, quote, "When they come for me, I'll have to go in a hurry," end quote. Now, of course, you have to ask, was this the rambling of a man who just had one too many drinks? Or were William and Margaret actually involved in something that could put their lives in danger or could cause them to have to, leave in a hurry? Now, not long after, there were reports of the couple being seen outside of Mexico City. But these statements were quickly retracted when Sheriff Bob Bailey showed up to investigate. He spoke to employees at Val de Bravo, showing them photos of the couple. Some said that they stayed there for a couple of months, a few years ago, but there were no records or proof that they had been there at all over the past couple of years. Plus, why would they stay, in this area if they have land that they own in another area of Mexico? So let's talk a little bit about motive. So rumors swirled that Margaret had overdosed once, possibly driven to it by William's cheating. He was known to have affairs, and he even bought one of his mistresses a car. Now, March 18th, 2013, Jerry Cash, a local resident, recalled dropping off Girl Scout cookies shortly before the couple disappeared. She said that William seemed tense and agitated and quite unhappy that she was in the house. And she said that Margaret seemed very upset about something and distracted. And then there's this someone who asked to be kept anonymous told authorities that in June of 1957, William had told them, "If I ever disappear, make it sound like everything's fine." Once again, that doesn't sound like a man planning a simple vacation, especially because you never know. Like, make it seem like everything's fine, but nobody's really making it seem like everything's fine in this situation. It seems like they've gone missing. Nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows where they've gone to. You have all these letters saying, or you have this letter and this telegram stating, sell this, put money towards the business. But you're not even going to collect money from your business. I guess that's actually like a big thing that has been kind of brewing in my head is you own this business. You're not going to take any kind of payoff from it. Like, you're just going to sell this and sell that and give it to these people. So that's kind of one thing that I also find weird. So let's fast forward to 1972. A family rents the Patterson home. It's a beautiful split level, built in 1939, fully furnished in a safe and quiet neighborhood. And it's suspiciously cheap. So the family had been relocated to El Paso as the father worked for the railroad, and that's where he was transferred to. They knew nothing of the events that had taken place. They knew nothing of William and Margaret Patterson. They were just ecstatic to find this home that they could afford in a nice, quiet neighborhood, and they snatched it up. Now, Elizabeth, the daughter, told Leon Baker of El Paso Ghost Tours that she felt rich, with the beautiful fireplace, the gorgeous antique furniture, amazing views. They thought it was odd when they would take photos inside the home, though, because the photos would never turn out. Now, what happened over the next 3 months have actually become part of local legend. Elizabeth said that she knew something was off in the home, especially the day she saw a cat sitting on the counter. No color, very ghostly, just a sheer transparent figure. And his tail was wrapped around his legs, moving slightly at the tip, and he looked like he was just sitting there waiting to be fed, like your typical every cat. She said that she wanted to pet him, so she reached out and he just disappeared right into thin air. When she ran and told her mother about this, because of course, if, I would have to tell somebody if this happened to me too, her mother claimed that she was just being dramatic and she was just, stop making up stories, or it was just the stress of the move and stress of, just so many changes in life. Okay. Now, her brother was taking a bath a couple of days later and he started screaming. And when everybody ran in, he claimed that there was a woman just standing in the doorway watching him take a bath. A woman in 1950s clothing. Now, remember, this is in 1972. Now, Elizabeth actually claimed that she saw this woman later as well. She said the woman was as solid as any person, but she was standing behind a sheer type curtain. The family had all heard high heels on the stairs all the time, as if somebody was just walking up and down the stairs. They smelled pipe smoke. They smelled perfume, and they even smelled motor oil, the kind that you would put in boats. If that's not a sign, I don't know what it is. A 1930s radio would turn on and off by itself, and Elizabeth's father, a skeptic who didn't believe in ghosts, was unable to get any sleep in the home. He said that no matter when he tried to sleep, day, night, he always felt like somebody was just constantly watching him. And he just couldn't stand it any longer. So they moved out after only 3 months. This was when they were told that was the Patterson house, and they were told what happened to the couple and how the case had never been solved. So that kind of makes me wonder, was William and Margaret trying to reach out and tell them that, hey, something happened to us? But it didn't seem like they were trying to really communicate. It just seemed like they were still living their lives along with, the family. Now, in 1984, caretaker Reynaldo Nengare, he came forward. Now, he was the caretaker of the Patterson's house. He would watch it while they were away, and he even actually watched it a little bit while the whole thing was happening. Now, he said that back in 1957, he found blood in the garage. He found a piece of scalp on the boat propeller. There was a bloody pair of jeans with William's Rolex. And he saw somebody shove bloody sheets into a trunk. Now, I'm sure everybody's asking, well, why didn't he report this at the time? Well, he was undocumented and he was actually afraid to be deported. His story was never confirmed, but, it was probably a little hard to do that long later. And in 1986, he actually died in a car accident. But what if what he said was true? Maybe the Pattersons never left the house. Some say that they're buried under the floorboards or something. Now, theories about the Pattersons' disappearance range from reasonable and, plausible to absolutely bizarre. One is that they were murdered and there was a cover-up by those who stood to inherit, and some say that they even paid off the police force and the authorities to continue to look like they were investigating, but not. Another theory is that Margaret killed William in a fit of rage about his drinking and his mistresses and all of that, and that she went into hiding. And then there's another one that William killed Margaret in a fit of rage. And they did say, like, one of his mistresses claimed that he was a heavy drinker and he could become aggressive. Okay, I mean, and then I guess I could see that happening, but I still don't see, I don't know, there's a lot of factors that don't make sense there. There was also one that said they were Russian spies forced to flee. Now, apparently someone had reported that William was caught taking photos of Fort Bliss and military shipments, like the ships that would come and go. So, and I mean, this was around the Cold War and, issues that were going on with Russia and the Soviet Union. So I could kind of see that that's also plausible. I mean, I'm not going to say they weren't Russian spies, because maybe they were. Maybe that's why they fled. Maybe that's where they actually ended up. That's why nobody could find them in Mexico. Nobody could find them in California or Florida or anywhere here in America, whether it be, the Canada part of America, the South America part, United States, everything like that. Now, some say that they were abducted by aliens. While I do believe there is, life out there, I don't know why they would be interested in this quiet little couple from El Paso, but maybe I also don't know their thought process. Some people say that they were buried in the basement or hidden beneath the garage. Also plausible, but there was never any sign of foul play. So it's like nothing was ever found to lead them to dig up the yard or look in the basement or in the garage. Some claim to see them in Mexico, but once again, no proof, no records, no confirmed sightings. And then when those people were questioned again, those statements were retracted, which is kind of odd to me, because I don't know why you would say, yeah, I totally saw them, and then go back on that. But now the FBI has said that they have no file on the Pattersons, but Cold War espionage, not so far-fetched for the 1950s. William and Margaret Patterson were declared legally dead in 1964, but their case was never closed. It's never been solved, never been explained. Maybe they fled, maybe they were killed and never left the house. So many people had something to gain. The letters, the sightings, the telegrams, once again. Could they have even orchestrated their own missing, their own disappearance to hide the truth? Whatever happened, the Pattersons definitely left behind more questions than answers. And this is a 70-year-old cold case. If you have any information, definitely call the police if you know anything. If you have anything that could be helpful. Also, send me a message and let me know too. But with that, I will see you the next bump in the night. You've been listening to Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces, the podcast where the world of true crime meets the paranormal. I'm your host, Cassiopeia. Join me every Tuesday as I deep dive into chilling cases that have baffled investigators in the eerie places where dark stories still linger. If you can't get enough of these creepy tales, consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, where you can access exclusive content, early episode releases, and bonus material that'll make you sleep with one eye open. You can also grab some Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces merchandise to keep the spookiness close, whether it's a mug for your morning coffee or a hoodie to wrap yourself in on those cold, stormy nights. If you love what you hear, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell your friends and give a rating to help with that pesky algorithm. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, keep your lights on because you never know what might be lurking in the dark.